Hello, this is Douglas Eby, author of the Creative Mind series of sites. This episode is an excerpt from a longer podcast or video. See the notes for details and links to resources.
Hi, I'm Emma, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and you're listening to the Therapy in a Nutshell podcast. It's my mission to create easy-to-understand educational content about therapeutic skills and topics that anyone can use in their daily life. I hope these episodes bring you more insight into how your mind works and what actions you can take to improve your mental health. Each podcast episode comes from a corresponding video you can find on the Therapy in a Nutshell YouTube channel. Also, these podcasts are educational and don't replace the advice or direction you may be receiving from a therapist or other health professional. Now let's jump into today's skill. Your brain is not designed to make you happy, it's made to keep you alive. And in order to do that, it's got some built-in biases, including a negativity bias that literally filters what you see, what you pay attention to, what you notice in your life. And this is why you might feel like everything is getting worse all the time. This bias fuels depression and anxiety, and this thinking pattern might make you see the glass as half empty. Now, there are always thousands of pieces of information that your brain could process at any one time, but it uses attention to choose what to focus on. Your brain is literally processing sensory stimuli, internal sensations, thoughts, and feelings all at once. But you don't notice the vast majority of the things around you because you have selective attention. Like right now, you're hopefully paying attention to me. But there's a million things you could put your attention on. So shift your attention to your breathing. Now shift your attention to the way your shirt feels on your body. Now to the roof of your mouth. What does that feel like? Now notice any sounds. Now pay attention to the source of light in your room. Now, all of these things were here all the time, but you didn't notice them or you weren't noticing them because your attention was, hopefully, here. Now, trouble abounds everywhere, but goodness abounds everywhere too. Your assumptions create your reality. What you pay attention to, you get more of. Your brain literally makes more neural pathways about the things you pay attention to. So if you notice a lot of dangerous or anxiety-provoking things, it's going to make more pathways for stressful, dangerous, or anxiety-provoking things. Your brain has a built-in feature called negativity bias. It's a cognitive phenomenon where people tend to pay more attention to, remember more vividly, and be influenced more strongly by negative information compared to positive or neutral information. This bias is believed to have evolutionary roots, where our ancestors needed to be hyper-aware of potential threats and dangers in their environment for survival. So let's say, for example, that your ancestor was in an open field with 100 delicious watermelons and one saber-toothed tiger. Which one would they focus on? In order to survive, you had to selectively filter out the positive opportunities and pay attention to dangers. This is called negativity bias or risk aversion bias. Your brain is not designed to make you happy. Your brain is designed to keep you alive long enough to reproduce. Focusing on negative stimuli helps us respond quickly to avoid harm or dangerous situations. However, in modern times, this bias can lead to a skewed perception of reality and an increased sensitivity to negative events or news. You can notice this mental filter when people say things like, "Kids these days are worse than ever." Okay, people have literally been saying this since Aristotle, at least. It's like our brain is wired to notice how bad things are. People might say, "Everyone is so mean," or "He never takes out the trash," or "Nobody likes me." I mean, which YouTube comments do you think stand out? The dozens of positive ones or the one really nasty one? Okay, here's another one. "This world is going downhill fast. Everything is awful." Well, no. Now that you know about negativity bias, which is our mental filter, which news stories do you think most people click on? "Everything seems fine in these 10,000 cities." Or, "Holy cow, there's flooding in this one city." After learning to watch for this, you will see it all over the news. So, for example, in the last year in my state, we saw a series of stories like this. "Utah is in a terrible drought. Utah's terrible drought continues. Utah's gonna dry up and everyone's gonna die," right? Like Utah's in this terrible drought over and over again. And then in the middle of the summer, there was a story that ran like this. Utah just got a ton of rain, but it probably won't do much good in this terrible drought. And then pray for snow. And then Utah just got a ton of snow. Oh, wow, the snow continues. Utah's having a record-breaking snow year. Okay. Uh-oh, look at the collapsed roofs in this one place. Oh yeah, we're not in a drought anymore. Utah just got a ton more snow. But now let's worry about flooding. Everything's going to be destroyed by flooding. Everyone needs to worry about flooding. Look, this one street was destroyed by flooding. Okay, now it's summer. It's really hot. Let's talk about how awful the heat is again. Okay, now I do want to say, some of you are probably going to comment right now, but what about climate change? I get it about climate change. But if the news media actually cared about climate change, they would run educational stories about how to limit your emissions or advocate with your congressman or how to decrease commercialism, right? But instead, the news focuses on the sensational stories because they know about this negative bias in your brain and they know they can make you look, which means click, which means they make more money by running frightening stories. A story about, hey, let's change out your lawnmower to an electric one is just not going to make them as much money as, holy cow, check out this one place where something bad is happening. You can tell I get a little bit worked up about this, and I do it because our media consumption feeds our negativity bias. They profit off of our negativity bias, and our negativity bias feeds depression and anxiety. And then they get to make money by running stories about the anxiety epidemic, right? The thing is, most of us don't even notice it. That's how a bias works. If you believe that every single aspect of the world today is worse than in the past, may I remind you about polio, smallpox, people dying from tooth infections because dentistry and antibiotics weren't available. I'm not saying that there aren't bad things happening now. I just believe that it's negativity bias that says things are worse than they've ever been. Back to my main idea. Negativity bias doesn't just impact our emotions. It also messes with our relationships, politics, and our decision making. People might find it challenging to let go of any negative experiences. We might ruminate on them more often, and we might feel the emotional impact of negative events more intensely compared to positive ones. Also, if we feel bad, it's easy to look for reasons that we feel bad. So this is called emotional reasoning, and we're going to talk more about this in another video. But PMS is a good example of this, right? Your body starts to feel like crap, and all of a sudden, you're scanning, you're looking for reasons why you feel this way. And pretty soon you believe that the real problem is your husband, right? He didn't put out the trash or something. And this is important, right? Because anxiety literally sensitizes our brain to be more anxious. When we feel anxious, we're more likely to scan for danger and notice things that we perceive as threatening. And then we'll feel more anxious and the spiral continues. So we have to be aware of this mental filter, this negativity bias, if we want to manage anxiety. Chronic anxiety or trauma also makes our brain more vigilant to threats. So this seems kind of unfair. The more anxious you are, the more likely you'll see threats everywhere and feel more anxious.
Welcome to the HSP and Neurodivergent podcast. I'm Julie Bieland, a psychotherapist and founder of Sensitive Empowerment, specializing in helping the highly sensitive, autistic, and neurodivergent really embrace their gifts and flourish to their fullest potential. Now, the brain has a negativity bias, which means we literally have more electrical activity in our brain when we're exposed to things that are negative. That has to do with the evolution of this trait, for example, the evolution of humans in general, because we used to, if you imagine living out on the land and, you could be attacked by a lion at any moment, you had to be very conscious of threats. And so what's happened, because that evolved into our current circumstances, the brain can't tell the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. So what happens with that is stress or nervousness, fear, different things like that can actually trigger a response in the brain that alerts your system to think that it needs to set off these alarm bells and warning bells. And that's something that happens even more so in this population. So we're going to really be filling that positive tank intentionally, and that's why I'm having you have a separate journal, because once we start filling up that positive tank, it makes a difference in absolutely everything that you do. It's unbelievable what a difference that makes, because you need it to be full. It's going to help you with things that you're going through in your life, with your health, with your well-being in general, if that's full, versus if it's not full. That's when we really struggle the most. And what's interesting is it takes up to 5 positives just to neutralize 1 negative. So a quick tip about that is if you're taking in a lot of negative, whether it's through the news or different things, you've got to counter that with positivity, with positive things. And what's interesting about how the brain works is that you, like a negative that you're exposed to, it instantly sticks to your brain. But a positive can take up to 15 seconds or more for you to really concentrate on it before it sort of soaks into your brain and makes an impact. And that's not really something we do very naturally. So throughout this course, I'm going to teach you about how to do that. And it can be little things like, next time you see something beautiful in nature, a bird, a tree, a sunset, sunrise, I want you to intentionally every day start soaking that in. Spend time really soaking it in.
Thanks for listening. See the Creative Mind post for this podcast episode with links to resources and other material.